Welcome to the Hired Geek Podcast, where each week we explore the impact of EdTech on the student experience with engaging, fun, and relevant conversations that honor the wide range of work happening all across the higher ed ecosystem. I'm your host, Dustin Ramsdell. I've been working in and around higher ed for the past decade, focused on student support and digital experiences. Join me every week for discussions with some of the best minds in education technology. The Hired Geek Podcast is a part of the Enrollify Podcast Network, a robust collection of shows designed to help higher education professionals like you grow. Explore our other shows at enrollify.org or check out some of my personal favorites linked in the show notes below. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the leading AI-powered all-in-one student engagement platform helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, and engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.
Hello there, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Higher Ed Geek Podcast, episode number 268 with Dr. Paul Gordon Brown. I've known him for a while. We worked together for the past couple of years on a podcast, but I've just always appreciated his approach, his commitment to content creation, and his love of all things digital transformation. His work is focused for the most part in kind of residential education, the curricular approach, but he served at Roompact for the past several years and just love what they do, love what they're all about. Just kind of their whole organization. So always appreciate any quality time like this to talk with folks from Roompact, especially Paul. And we kind of talk about his perspectives on, the digital transformation of the residential education experience, and sprinkle a little AI in there as usual, and just kind of what this moment is looking like for kind of residential education for students, and whether or not it's become more of a luxury, and what we can try to maybe do about that. So really appreciate Paul's time, appreciate all that he shared, appreciate you for listening to this awesome episode number 268 with Paul Gordon Brown.
So Roompact is a residence life and education company. If you're at all familiar with kind of the space, there's college student housing, which is really more the operational side of things. We focus on the educational, the student engagement side, a lot of things that happen in the life of the hall, as the name suggests. And because this position is so unique on campus in terms of the breadth of what it deals with, from student conduct to students learning about themselves and their own personal growth, and all of that, our software really specializes in on how can we give the tools and turn back the data to professionals working in residence life so that they can make sense of it and make decisions and hopefully improve the student experience.
Yeah. And I mean, I've appreciated what you all been doing for a long time now, just sort of been following, and I've had the opportunity to work with you all a little bit more closely over these past couple of years and everything. And I think it is that idea of I guess we'll get into this, I think, throughout the episode, but even just for me, I came up through the traditional path of being an RA and working, as a graduate student, as a hall director and stuff. And technology was sort of around with the work that I was doing in the halls, but not super at the forefront, or it was just maybe to kind of manage room placements or something. It was very much kind of in the background to do just a transactional thing. And that was it. So I know you've worked in the space for a while. I think you can maybe kind of draw a longer sort of arc of the change over time. So how have you seen digital transformation changing the work of Res Life over the years?
Sure. I mean, it kind of mirrors really the change in how we view college student housing in general, right? If we even go back to the 60s and the 70s, it was very much run more like an apartment complex, a very service-oriented kind of industry. But then the more that college and universities kind of turned on to the fact that, hey, wait a minute, the students that live on campus are more likely to be retained, and there's certain outcomes that we can get from that, the sophistication of kind of residence life and housing kind of grew over the course of the years. And I think if you think of technology, it's just a natural extension of that, because we know just the bare fact of a student living on campus means they're more likely to feel connected to the institution, and they're more likely to be retained. So if we can then be intentional about focusing those experiences, enhancing that, then we can even push that further beyond just the, hey, you showed up, that's a positive, but can we make it deeper? And I think that's really where the digital tools come in. If you've ever worked in residence life or know anyone that works in residence life, it's a tough job. It entails a lot of different hours, from one thing to the next, a student crisis 1 minute to the student breaking a policy in another, to trying to connect students with resources on campus that can help them. I mean, it's a big job and a big undertaking. And certainly coming out of COVID times, that only revealed how deep that can get. And I think that's where digital tools kind of come into play is, are there ways that we can make this process more efficient, get back some staff member time so that they can focus more in on their students' experiences? But also, through all this data we collect, can we get some insights into how we can improve that? And it's not just a service delivery, are you satisfied type of experience, but also a how can we improve educational outcomes for students? That's really, I think, what, when I think about what I do and what our software does, what really makes it unique is it focuses in on that aspect.
Well, I think with a lot of stuff too with ed tech nowadays, it's like, and at least I guess on the sort of just the broad umbrella of like digital student engagement or like building like digital community or just like anything like that, I think especially now when there's just this hard reset on sort of the higher ed kind of ecosystem and everything, not sort of like resting on our laurels or assuming that like student learning and development and community building like is this sort of just natural byproduct of like, well, you just put a bunch of students in a residence hall and they're all going to become best friends and learn and grow and have all this like sort of like, coming of age experience or whatever. It's like that is sort of like kind of like the natural arc to an extent, but like you don't want to just like rely on it happening by totally by itself. Like you want to ensure that students are getting what they need when they need it, and just like that you can maybe, I guess, like, the sort of like trust but verify, maybe the idea of like, well, the students are engaging, they're showing up, they're doing the things that we know lead them towards, these curricular outcomes and goals and learning outcomes and things. So like, how can we, use every tool in our digital tool belt, I guess, to like have the residence life experience be, as impactful as it can be, whether it's Roompact or others. Like, are you seeing like AI kind of filter into sort of like how these tools are maybe managed on the back end, how they're like providing like AI or data insights through utilizing AI or anything? Like, do you see that coming in yet here? Or like, is it something that I know I'll probably get your perspective on towards the end of the episode of like something that maybe you're kind of tracking like on the horizon?
Yeah. Oh, poke the bear, Dustin. My thoughts on AI.
You always got to get the hot takes here. Yeah.
I mean, here's the thing. So I won't mention, there's another, like in terms of our software space, we're a little bit of an island in terms of what we do. Like we're the only real company that does the things that we do. There's a Venn diagram of overlap with some other companies. But in terms of people squarely focused on residence life and education, I'd say we're really, truly the only one. But in that, when I'll give an example, but I won't name names, I just see this shoehorning of AI into places just to see what sticks that just is totally uninteresting. Like there is a software company that introduced help. AI can help you write an email. And I'm just like, that's about the most uninteresting application of AI that I've ever seen. Plus, there's 80 million other ways. I mean, it's built into Mac systems now at a system level. So why do I need you to have it in the software? I think what is really interesting is how can you use AI to help you make sense of large amounts of data? To me, that's interesting because that truly saves time, that truly provides an insight that I may not have had before, that I think this kind of euphoria, which happens with every technology. I mean, I've been through this before. Oh, it's AI. So we're just going to throw AI every single possible place we could to see what sticks. We're in the bubble right now. We're in the bubble of AI until it kind of like pulls back and then it finds where it fits in. But to me, it's how can it help us answer interesting questions? And that's just not what I've seen come out mostly in most spaces. And really truly intelligent AI. Because I feel like sometimes I can create algorithms that pop out answers about things. That's not really what, I guess it's a form of AI, but I'm talking about truly looking in between lines and things like that an algorithm kind of can't do. And to me, that's where the interesting stuff happens. So I've seen very little of that so far, but I think that's where it ends up. Maybe we need to go through this in order to get to that point. But for me, and even when we've talked about it internally about if we're going to do it, like what's interesting and what's truly a value add, or do you just slap it on just to say, hey, we have AI features because everyone wants AI? Or we're kind of like when social media was starting. We're on social media. Okay. Well, what are you doing with it? Like, that's what's interesting. I don't care that you're
Mhm.
baseline on it. I mean, that's what you have to pay to enter, but like, what are you doing with it? And so I have all sorts of like feelings about kind of how AI shows up.
Well, I think that even like the same question, which I appreciate sort of your candor, and I think you absolutely have like the right sort of measured take that I definitely agree with as well. But the idea of like, can it answer interesting questions is like such a great North Star for a lot of things, even for like, dating back to what you're saying, like the social media example is like, I think what a lot of people appreciated about it when people were doing it right is like it could provide really like authentic behind the scenes or sort of like how we make, the thing that we make or how we do whatever we do. And like that answers interesting questions. It's like, yeah, that would have been really hard to do prior to that is provide this like direct communication to your audience and you can like, add some personality and some authenticity to your like organization or whatever. And certainly like in higher ed, the same thing. Like if you could provide these really cool sort of like authentic insights and sort of community building efforts and stuff, it's like it would have been really hard to do that otherwise. And then like AI, the same thing. If it's just like kind of regurgitating or resurfacing like this dashboard that you had access yesterday and now it's just doing it with like a little extra zing and sparkle whatever, it's like, should I have to like pay more for that or something? I don't think so. And that's like honestly what some
There's
companies are
certainly
trying to
companies
do.
that would hope you would pay more for that.
Right,
I don't know
exactly.
that that's truly the value add that justifies it, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and that's again, like I think I've said this a lot of times, like when I've talked to Matt, like the CEO of Roompact before, is just like that. I think you all have treaded a different path and shown that's a different way in terms of just like we're well past I think sort of this like this rise and fall of kind of like I mean startups in general, but just like just these technology companies and ed tech and everything. Where like the idea of just bringing sort of a measured, right-sized approach and level set expectations and not just like flying by the whims of like, the investor class and like private equity firms and all this kind of stuff. Like I've always admired you guys for kind of like going your own way and determining your own priorities and that sort of thing. And the idea of like AI is only going to get cheaper, only going to get easier to utilize and implement. And the idea of like wanting to leverage it to answer interesting questions. The idea of like, I'm sure for a lot of ed tech tools, they probably already have that dynamic of like, we already provide insights about utilization of our tool, like the engagement metrics and everything. Like we can't just resurface that with a new coat of paint. We need to do more than that. We need to have it be able to like do something that doesn't do already or give a lot more like context or something or like that ability to like interface with like those metrics and be like, okay, like let me pop up this chatbot that allows me to like ask questions of what I'm seeing. Like it's like stuff
Mm-hmm.
like that, which is obviously like a higher level and not just sort of like this, service level thing that then that you like really kind of overly boast about or something. So I think that's always going to be, I think the like cautionary tale for this moment of like AI, especially in ed tech, I think is that like we've experienced such a like crazy turbulence over the past couple of years. It's like let's not like get too carried away with like kind of haphazard or sort of like shallow implementations of AI. Like let's be thoughtful about it and be realistic about like what the capabilities are of it or what any of that kind of stuff. So I appreciate that sort of level-headed perspective, which I feel like I'm always trying to like. I mean, I think a lot of the people that I like to talk to, I think sort of share similar kind of like perspectives on it. So it's like I'm at least going to be like that voice in the room through like my perspective and the people that I have on to sort of juxtapose to some others. But
I mean,
yeah, it's just an interesting moment.
sometimes I wonder too if it's just that I'm getting older and I'm becoming a curmudgeon. I mean,
No,
because
no.
when earlier tech waves kind of came through, I think I was all like, yeah, this is the future. Like we all need to focus on it. Everyone needs to throw everything at it. And now that I've been through a few of those, I go, yeah, like it's going to be important, but like for what? And I'm a little bit more critical about some of those things than I think I was when I was younger and it was newer and, caught up in that and it's exciting. And I just see it as like, okay, well, yeah, like it definitely will be in things. No doubt. I have no doubt. There's no doubt I would not argue against AI in any kind of way, but there is this kind of like deluge then like, a correction that goes on and we're not into the correction phase yet because I think people just don't really understand where does this go? What does it do? What is the most interesting uses of it? And so it's just kind of throw everything at it and it's a little bit of a frenzy. Maybe I'm just a curmudgeon and I'm old, and that's why
No, I feel like you'd only be in full curmudgeon mode if you're like, AI is going to destroy the world or whatever. It's like, I don't think that that's going to happen. Like, I
Well,
really hope
actually,
it
I
doesn't
do think
happen,
that's a
but
distinct possibility.
it could
But
happen. I don't, but
there are ways when I watch, when I used to watch these like sci-fi, Armageddon type movies that I think, oh wow, that's crazy. That could, like that would never happen. And then as we progressed, I'm like, oh, that seems actually kind of reasonable. Like, actually, I can kind of see some parallels in that movie where I thought, oh, that'll never happen. And I'm like, maybe not quite as far-fetched as it might have initially seemed.
yeah, yeah. Well, I think, yeah, I get it. Having a level-headed approach, because I think, yeah, it's almost that idea of like, if you could avoid having that, like, that correction, that sort of like whiplash, like, I think just
Yeah.
knowing that we've seen that sort of like moment of having to like the irrational optimism and everything
Mhm.
else, like, you hire on, you're expecting the good times to roll this way forever. It's always just going to be, up and to the right kind of thing. And it's like, maybe, but then like it's going to be a really sucky day if you have to like lay off a third of your workforce all at the same time because like it just didn't work out how you thought it would be. It's like, and I think it's an idea of like there's going to be such a few number of like, companies or people or whatever else that get to like experience sort of like the, benefits of being like the early adopter or whatever else. But it's like there's just like so much risk involved. And yeah, just that idea of like, I think certainly like in the education space, like that is where I think sometimes there's still like skepticism or trepidation about like, from institutions about these ed tech companies. It's like, are you going to be around here in like 5 years? Like, I've existed as an institution for like 200 years. Like we're
Yeah.
in the long game. Like I'm not going to choose like a new vendor every 3 years because the one I just chose like went bankrupt because like it's those sort
Yeah.
of things. And I think especially like, I don't know, I guess like trying to kind of like tie it back into like residence life. I think it's that idea too of like the idea of certain areas and sort of like, the higher ed ecosystem, like one, like just writ large education. Obviously, there's stuff like FERPA, like protecting student data and all this kind of stuff. But then like these are students who are literally like living on campus. It's like we want to be like thoughtful about like what sort of tools are we bringing in? Like how does, privacy play in, whatever else. But like, so I think, yeah, like again, I'll just keep sort of like bolding, circling, underlining like just the level-headed, thoughtful approach to utilizing technology tools. And I think especially in an area like this, in like the residential life experience and everything. But and to sort of weave this into segueing on sort of a different question and topic, I think you are somebody who I've always appreciated that has been very like thoughtful in trying to like crystallize ideas, put them together, share them out with the world, like provide sort of commentary or tools and resources and different things. Like you've been, kind of in the content creation space, I feel like predominantly in sort of like blogging and social media for a very long time. Like I've known you first through that and followed you through that and everything. So, you've continued that vein from like earlier days in your career to now, like kind of embodying that through the work you're doing at Roompact and a lot of the resources that they're putting out. What makes that such an important part of your work, like prior to and during your time at Roompact?
Yeah. So, like, when I was finishing my PhD, I used blogging as a means of exploring ideas in a different kind of way, all related to my dissertation work. And it really kind of helped me personally work through ideas in a different format, something that's more informal. I think it certainly made my dissertation and research stronger by utilizing that and then putting it out in the public because that allows for commentary or thoughts or, allowed me a chance to learn. And it was really through that experience of doing that myself that when I came to Roompact, one of the things that I wanted to do was put out content under our banner. I'm a firm believer that 90% of the content that is on the World Wide Web is absolute junk. And there's 10% that is really good and really useful. And I think that creates a space where, like, in terms of us as a company, how can we contribute high quality content that's freely available and accessible to people? And that's kind of been the way that we've approached all the content that we produce at Roompact. So we produce a podcast, we produce blog posts, we have some resource pages, a curriculum for student staff, all these kinds of things, and we put it out for free. So you kind of alluded this in terms of the way that Roompact operates as a company, in that We're not trying to grow really fast and sell ourselves to someone. That was never the goal. It remains not the goal. The goal is to do some really cool kind of transformative work, take care of our employees, and then just keep down that path. And so that's why a lot of the content we produce isn't behind some kind of give us your email address so that we can send you sales pitches. It's not behind some kind of wall only available to our clients. It's something that we put out freely because we're playing a longer game. And the longer game is, if everyone is interested in thinking thoughtful about these things, then we're going to naturally be breeding people that want to look at our software. And so we don't have to do a hard sell to the people that are potentially interested in our software. Plus, it's just good work. So if you never use our software at all, and I'm kind of helping improve your operations a little bit, and it, honestly, from a monetary perspective, doesn't really cost us that much, then great. I'm happy with that. That's actually also what gives us a little bit of leverage, because I've seen a lot of higher ed professionals over time that are like, oh, it'd be really awesome if someone pulled together these resources or made them free. And then they kind of do that, maybe throw up a website, but they have a full-time job, so they can't devote all their time to it. And then it kind of slowly dies over time. We're more durable. We make money. I can pay people to produce really good content and make it available. And so why not? And that's kind of where it fits in for me, is how can we use this to kind of improve the field as a whole, not just what is this going to translate to in a direct line over to sales. Now, would our salesperson wish that we had that? Yes, absolutely. But I've even turned him around to the fact that higher ed is not a hard sell type of environment. You can turn off a lot of people really fast if you go in with that kind of mentality. And it's a much slower process. I mean, we were talking about institutions kind of being lowercase c conservative and slow. I mean, that also means how they operate in terms of technology adoption generally too.
Yeah, and it's a good parallel to draw in the ed tech business as like the teaching business, or like the kind of support business with like the content and everything. And I think that's the idea. It's like you keep building that goodwill. It's like when that sale time comes and everything, it's they're either being like, hey, we're ready to buy, like, and it's just being like, oh, hey, well, yeah, we're here. Like, it's like you almost don't need to like make the pitch or something, or it's just like an easier pitch of just being like, I know we have to kind of maybe like go through this to like maybe satisfy a couple of people on the team or whatever, but like. Yeah, so I mean, it's a powerful thing. It is definitely like a long-term investment, but I appreciate the individuals and the organizations that have made this sort of commitment. So I think it is good advice for any similar higher ed tech company to try to figure out what their approach would be, because I think it's even that idea where, I mean, in a lot of different ways, people always be like, well, how did you get to be where you are? I want to like be just like you. And I'm just going to like repeat everything that you did. And it's like, yeah, maybe that'll work. But like, sometimes it is just like, I was the one who was able to do this way and get to where I am or whatever. Cause it could be like nowadays where it's like, okay, do your own sort of like educational explainer videos on TikTok about a thing that's relevant to your audience. And if that's like where your audience is and makes sense for you to be there or whatever, like it's trying to like plug that value of like be of service, be like a good partner, and do all that, and then sort of like insert it into whatever channel, platform, format, modality, makes sense. Because it could be sometimes where it's like, oh man, we've like really, had a lot of success like going out to in-person events and mingling and doing that, or our webinars are amazing. People love them because we just do them a certain way or whatever else. But so yeah, there's a lot of ways to do this, but it is just, I think, smart and wise to find your way to sort of ingratiate yourself and kind of plant those seeds and farm, the yield as it comes in the future. But and I guess as we're sort of wrapping up here, I'd kind of stolen my own thunder a little bit, I guess, with like, the AI of it all on the horizon, on a lot of people's horizons. We're all sort of, keeping an eye on that. But is there anything else specific to your work in sort of this residential education technology space? Like, what are you keeping your eye on the horizon that may impact your work in your future?
Yeah. What's really interesting to me is there's always been this kind of push-pull between, do we view college student housing in a more service orientation, or do we view it more in a student engagement, student life orientation? And different institutions fall different places on that spectrum, right? Like some will go completely all over to the service area and be like, hey, running a auxiliary. Here's the exact service stuff, etc., with no mind to the student life stuff. And sometimes even people go to the extreme in the other one, meaning it's so student life and so, like, let's say, over designed and over complicated that you're kind of losing some of the core features in there as well. And I watched this push pull and back and forth and this kind of pendulum swing. And I think coming out of COVID, there was a lot of different kind of swirling things. Like, our students need to be more connected to one another because they haven't been around people and they need to go, which was true. And what does that mean? So we're only going to focus on the community building aspects and lean hard into that. Then there's pressures to, have the best amenities and things like that. That's always kind of existed for a little, at least the last decade and a half to 2 decades, and things like that. This arms race of lazy rivers and things like that you always hear about. And that's where it goes to the heart of what's the value proposition of higher education. And I think that is the broader societal question. And I think that plays out in the residence life space as well. I think my biggest concern, and I've been concerned about this for a while, is, does an on-campus, in-person, residential college experience, is that only afforded to people who have the money to pay for it? And if you can't pay for it, then you get the cheaper online version. Online can be great at equalizing things, but there's also some things like that you make connections when you go on a residential campus, social capital connections. I mean, if I go to Harvard, I'm going to meet a lot of people that are going to do a lot of cool things because I'm plugging into a social network. I'm not just going there for my education. Residence life has the opportunity to plug people into a social network. And I don't want to see a place where that is removed and there's implications for social mobility and things like that in there. So I think a lot about that, and it's been with me for a while, that I worry that as college becomes more expensive, that the residential experience is something that will become reserved only for a moneyed few, typically moneyed, or special elite, or whatever that may look like, because I think it's something that can be really transformative and should be open to everyone.
Yeah, that's a big one. I mean, because I think from a certain point of view, and that's just the very logical transactional point of view, and the idea of well, it costs money to run this hall, so you got to pay the money that it costs and whatever else, and it's going to become this luxury good where you can get the education like you said, but it's you can only do it online because you can't even afford an off-campus apartment or whatever. You've just got to maybe stay home or do whatever else. But the idea of man, what a radical notion if you flip the script and said the people most in need, we bring them to campus because it's you're going to get the most out of it. You have the most to gain. So you come to stay on campus. We provide this to you as a way to, like you said, equalize where obviously nothing's impossible. You can still build great social capital through being an online student. Everything is just harder. And the idea of if you're starting, from a certain point, it's well, we would want you to be able to have all the opportunities afforded to you at this institution. So we're going to bring you here, let you live on campus and do all the things, because you could also be super active in all the digital community, platforms and stuff we have. And also go to the basketball game, go, do this and that. So that would be interesting if some institution out there would sort of flip that script and model that way. I think it'd be really powerful because it'd be the idea of we're just putting the resources in, hey, you res life professional, you're going to have all the great same tools and things that you have always had and all the resources that you need to do your job. We're going to give you that money and not have it be reliant on well, how many students do we have living in and whatever else. Yeah. And it's whatever else. That's just where my mind goes. We're just man, that would be crazy. But it is sort of almost this weird sort of risk area of it become a luxury good.
That's part of the basic value proposition of residence life. Because I mean, even if you don't kind of bifurcate it as the on-campus versus let's say online version, you could also bifurcate it as if we're only running a hotel, you might get a little bit more outcomes just from the natural interactions being in the same physical space with someone. But that's different than what residence life tries to do, which is deepen those connections, kind of make those introductions, do those kinds of things, and enhances that. You could also make the distinction between someone that views housing more as a service as opposed to an engagement outcomes type space as well. So it's not even just an online in-person distinction, but it's also, I think, within the way that someone characterizes their housing, what they see its role being in there as well.
Well, I love it. Amazing, thought-provoking things here at the end, because I think that is like...
That's kind of a big one to drop right there.
Well, no, and if folks are following along with our episodes, I think with how these will be going out, so this is a behind the scenes kind of thing for people. I recorded an episode that we'll be posting after this, and maybe I'll flip them, I don't know, but with Dr. Keith Edwards about transformative leadership. And this sounds like an amazingly transformative idea for higher ed as they're navigating very disruptive and turbulent times, because it's like, yeah, if we're going to survive and keep providing high quality education for people, it's like we do have to kind of think outside of the box and understand sort of that those core questions of what you're grappling with is sort of bring it down into sort of maybe we keep kind of oscillating as our own institution between sort of the service and whatever else, but who do we want to be? How do we want to show up? What are our true values? And the idea of living out your values through your budget, kind of thing, just kind of getting down to kind of brass tacks there. So I think to ground it and kind of where obviously a lot of our conversation was going, technology can be sort of a way to sort of achieve those things. How can we use technology to sort of help facilitate those? Could it be oh, we could never do that or whatever else? I don't know. So a lot to think about, a lot to sort of kind of marinate on, but just always appreciate you having these kind of conversations and, of ways to connect with you and Roompact and all their great resources and everything. But just so appreciate you. Obviously, I mean, you're just somebody, again, who's, been in the game, kind of doing the content creation stuff for a long time, which I've always just really admired. And obviously admired Roompact as well for all that they do. And just hope folks will keep the conversation going, following you and all that you do. And we'll have ways to connect, like I said, in the show notes. So just thank you so much for your time and all that you shared.
Yeah, thanks, Dustin.
The Hired Geek Podcast is a part of the Enrollify Podcast Network. If you like this podcast, chances you'll like all the other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing constantly, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks all designed to empower you to be a better hired professional. Our shows help you find your next big idea and feature a selection of the industry's best as your host. Learn from people like Jamie Hunt, Seth Odell, Day Kibbolds, and Eddie Francis, as well as so many other of your favorite leaders in higher education. Enrollify is made possible by the support of Element 451, a leading AI-powered, all-in-one student engagement platform helping institutions create meaningful, personalized, engaging interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.